strike up.
Hi, this is James Devine with the Music Ed Podcast. Hey, I'd love to send you my free training, 7 tips to save 5 hours this week and every week. If you'd like to receive that, send me an email at jamesthedivine@gmail.com. Also, if your music event needs professional development or speaker, get in touch with me. I'd love to help out. Enjoy the podcast.
Where you get quick and easy tips on how to be a better band teacher.
This is James Devine with the Music Ed Podcast, and today I've got Adrian Gordon as a guest. He's the author of Note to Self, a music director's guide for transitioning to a new school and building a thriving music program. I just finished reading his book, and it was a blessing and an inspiration to me. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, James. I'm really happy to be here with you, and I appreciate the invite.
Adrian, why don't you start by telling us just kind of a brief bio of how you got to where you are today, where you're teaching, and maybe how you got into teaching, and a little bit about your career.
Sure. Well, teaching kind of found me. I didn't really seek it out. It found me, and I kind of fell into it. I was in transition from being out of college, and I was heavy into songwriting and performing in an acoustic pop R&B band, and I needed work too. It wasn't all fully paying the bills, so I ended up taking a teaching gig, and it just kind of hit me that hey, I enjoy this, and I like what I'm doing. I like seeing those light bulbs go off in the kids' heads where they can do it. They can perform great music no matter what level. When I started out, I started teaching kindergarten through 4th grade. And
Oh, wow.
I always found it a challenge and a welcome challenge to see how young I could instill that love and appreciation for music into kids. So it just kind of stuck. So, fast forward, this is my 18th year in the classroom. And I've taught quite a bit. I've done general music, like I said, for K through 4. I've done choir. I've been an assistant band director, and I've done strings for the past, I don't really know how many years, but strings is my forte, and I'm a violinist by trade. So yeah, it just kind of stuck after several years, and throughout all those transitions, I noticed there was some overlap and there were some commonalities. And in my last school transition, it was a little bit more challenging than any other transition had been. And I found myself really thinking about, okay, what am I doing, or what do I need to do to smooth out this transition? And I would have quite a few conversations with my colleagues, my best friend, and I would journal. And the summation of all these conversations and writings, it kind of blossomed into what I found to be this book, Note to Self. And I figured, in the dedication, I talk about how the book is dedicated to my fellow music educators who tirelessly strive to leave our profession in better shape than they found it. And I figured this could be my contribution to leave our music education profession in better shape. And my hope is that, as people transition, especially coming through this pandemic, that this is a great resource, a great tool for other music educators, and helps them transition and navigate all the changes that are coming in the next couple of years.
Well, I can honestly say from reading it, it was a help to me. And because I'm nearing the end of my full-time career, I may be transitioning to like part-time. I don't see myself as ever retiring completely, but I can see that it's going to, I can incorporate some of that advice into some of the things that I have for my future, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the hope. And I guess as musicians, do we ever really retire?
Some people do. Some people leave music completely and they never look back. But I would say 90% of the people I know, they're still involved in some way. It might be mentoring people. It might be judging at events. It might be teaching part-time. I have a friend who, he won't ever tell me his real age, but I think he's in his early 70s, and he keeps retiring, but then he just finds another part-time position that that he ends up doing. But I love him to death. He's a great friend.
Yeah, it's infectious. It's hard to leave music. It's such a powerful tool. It's such a gift in our lives, and it shapes emotions and all that. So, and experiences. So it's really hard to leave it. But you know, to each his own.
Let me just quote a section of your book, and then I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that. So there's one
Sure.
section that says, as you begin shaping or reshaping your program, you will start to find that some people will appreciate what you are doing and that some people won't. I wonder if you could kind of
Hmm.
expand on that.
Yeah, it's particularly difficult if you're coming into a position where the previous director was beloved and you're trying to bring your own spin and your own methods of doing things. Not everyone's going to appreciate that. Not everyone's going to like that. And not for any reason except that you are you and you are not the person that was there before. So you got to really tread lightly and think about how do we affect change. And before you even get started, you got to realize you can't please everybody. Some people are never going to be on board. But the idea and what I talk about in the book is believing in the power of professionalism, making sure that no matter what, you are professional. And I talk about in the book as well who you are as a music educator. And, throughout my transitions, I gave myself three descriptors: strong, gracious, and caring. And in the book, I talk about how I recommend everybody figure out what your descriptors are. And once you figure those out, filter every interaction, um, positive and negative, through those descriptors, and make sure that every interaction is professional. And for me in my case, I would say that every interaction, not just when things are great and shiny and new, but during those difficult times with really tough parents or administrators or faculty, that I'm professional and I'm strong and I'm gracious and I'm caring. That doesn't mean I get run over or anything like that, or I hold myself as a punching bag, but remain professional. Think about who you are and who you want to be. Because in the book I talk about you can't always control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And I think if people notice that there is a commitment to kindness and professionalism and just meeting people in their place of need, I think you're going to have a lot more people on board with your vision,
Uh-huh.
um, regardless of what that vision is. So this speaks to not even lifting the baton. This is more about who you are and how you get people to come on board to your vision as a music educator. And I think if you can figure out who you are through those descriptors first, and you portray that, and every interaction um, has that stamp on it, I think you're going to be set up pretty well to build the community and to build the program that you want.
That is definitely some great advice. And I have found that it doesn't matter what level the program is that you go into, it can often be difficult. So my second position, the one before at where I'm at now, I was the eighth director in 7 years. But there was a
Mm-hmm.
core group of students that the previous director, who had only been there a year, had really shown them what excellence could be.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
but she did it in a way that was maybe different than I would have done, because they didn't, like I would say, play a concert B flat scale just trying to find out where they were at, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And we
Mm-hmm.
tried some songs that were pretty easy, and they said, well, these are too easy for us. And I remember butting heads with them, and I said, well, you're saying it's too easy for you, but we can't even get through 8 measures of sight reading without completely falling apart. And so then they said,
Yeah.
well, please just pull out such and such song we played last year. We'll show you what we can do. And they were amazing at that song. And I think what she had done was she just took them and worked them through, working each note and each line. And that's what they needed at that time. And so that was an eye opener for both them and for me to kind of shift, and okay, they are capable of doing some things. So but it doesn't matter, what kind of program you go into, there's going to be that pushback. I think sometimes it's easier though, if you're going from a program that's at a 1, it's easier to bring it to like a 5 and everyone can see that improvement than maybe if you go into a place where it's already at 8 or 9 and you're bringing it from an 8 to an 8.1 or something.
Yeah, it depends. In my last transition, I had uh, kind of what you're talking about, where the program didn't want to move forward. They kind of wanted to stay in that one area. So it depends on what the climate and what the culture of the school is. Um, and I think what you spoke to is great. And I talk about that in the book, where you have to be practical, you've got to be pragmatic and meet your students where they are, and then develop your priorities and a strategy and a methodology to how you're going to get to whatever clear and attainable goals that you've set for the program over the next couple months, years, and then up to what I think is about 3 to 5 years until a program really settles and it becomes your own. But
Yeah.
in my own transition, I remember not even on the musical side. I came into an energy that was just so negative, where they really loved the previous director, and I talk about this in the book as well, where I would get airdrop messages of the previous director, just of the previous director's face, just letting me know that, hey, we are displeased that you are here. And I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who was airdropping these things to me. And I just at that point, I realized that there had to be some work done, not even musically, because they weren't where I had hoped they were going to be, but I knew I could get them there. But I
Uh-huh.
had to build that community and that culture first. So I started with just kind of humanizing myself and talking about who I am as a person, what my interests were. I would do goofy things, like I would have like a Jolly Rancher Friday for a hard week. Um, and then I would do jokes with my students, and to this day, I start every class with a dad joke, a cringy dad joke. And at first, all my students were like, "Oh my gosh, this guy with these jokes." But now, these students are asking for, "What's the joke of the day? What's the joke of the day?" And I have a few of them. They want to come up and tell a joke. So it's really and these are free things. This doesn't cost me any money. That's just an interaction, a smile, a question, a joke. These are free things that you can do to change the culture and change those attitudes, so that then you have a kind of like a clear path to build the
Uh-huh.
music program that you want, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Was that the program that was stuck at 1, or is that
Yes, that was the program that was stuck at 1. And by the time I was finished at that program, I think I brought it up to about a 4. And you know I think the students, like you talked about, they got a sense of, okay, this is what excellence is. But first and foremost, they knew that I cared about them as people, and that's what I really wanted to portray. And that music happened to be the vehicle to show them that. And once they knew that, they were much more willing to be on board with anything that I threw at them. And
that's
I
cool.
think back to my own secondary education, and one of my favorite classes, of course, was music, but beyond music, it was math. And I'm a terrible mathematician. But the reason I love math so much was because of the tone and the atmosphere that the teacher set up. He invested in us as people. He would ask us questions about our well being. He would have just kind of profound conversations about life, and we would still get work done. So it really, the content was there. We were still doing all the content that needed to be done, but he took the time, and this was free, it didn't cost anything. And he just invested in us as people. And it just made a huge difference as to the direction that the class moved, because we were much more willing to follow him. And you turn a corner to our music classrooms. I think it's the same idea. Not everyone's going to share that same passion that we do as music educators, and understand the power that music has had in our lives, but it can still be their favorite place to go to, if they know that this is a safe place, that they're welcomed. And like I said, the music happens to be a vehicle um, to show them that you care about who they are. I just think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that definitely makes a huge difference. I've been part of programs when I was growing up where I felt like I was just someone who played an instrument, and I've been part of programs where I was the teacher was interested in me and helping me become better. And in fact, I'm
Yeah.
meeting my high school director. I graduated in 1985 from high school, and I'll be back in my hometown next week. And he and I are going to try to get together. So we've been in touch for
Wow.
these last 37 years, whatever it's been. 37 years, I guess. That's hard to believe.
Yeah. And you see that speaks to the power of what that teacher, the influence that teacher had on you, because it wasn't for that teacher about checking a box and completing this standard and making sure we got through this piece. There was something deeper, a deeper connection that that teacher had that, for one, made you love music, but made you appreciate that teacher as a person, for 30 something years.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The one of the things you talked about that really struck home for me was about the importance of like taking care of your fitness on your instrument or continuing to play your instrument. And in my early days of my career, most of you use the example of a PE teacher who's like out of shape. And in the early days of my teaching career, most of the PE teachers I knew were terribly out of shape, and I was thinking they're not setting the example. And then when
Mm.
I changed to a different school, they were the most in shape people in the school, and so they were setting the example, with their own health and everything. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and why you feel that is important.
Yeah, I think for one, it's important for our own musical health. I think as you transition to a new position, you don't realize the amount of um, demands and strings that are pulling at you, and you need something to kind of anchor you to who you are as a professional, and that's a musician. And I think the best way to remember that you're a musician is to actually play music. So it's pretty straightforward, but I think a lot of times I've heard a lot of my colleagues say, "Yeah, I don't play anymore. I just teach or I just conduct." As a matter of fact, I'm here at the Midwest Clinic, and I was just speaking to um, a friend or a colleague, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't really play anymore. I should." And I mentioned the idea of the out of shape health and fitness coach, and he said, it's a really good point. And I was telling him that, your students, they are more perceptive than you know, and they're picking up a lot of things, particularly outside of the classroom. So if they see you um, playing your instrument on a regular basis, it just becomes a part of the culture. In the book I talk about in my last transition, I had a student who came into the class after school, and she said, I know you talk about practicing all the time, but for me to see you practice, uh, it's really something else. And I was practicing for an odd gig. I had a gig that was coming up where the bride and groom wanted some '90s booty shaking music, but they wanted it for a string quartet. So you can imagine how odd how odd that request was. So I had to actually sit there and practice. But when that student came in, she was so shocked to see her teacher practice, and it struck home. And that's when I realized, man, even if I can play 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't matter. Just to stay in touch with my instrument, for one, for what my students are seeing from me, and then my own musical anchor, to be have it as my own musical anchor. I think that's so important. And then I think also I talk about in the book your musical health. You don't want to be so wrapped up in pedagogy where you forget the aesthetic value of music. And I think, for one, listening to music, and I recommend as music educators, we listen to something old and something new and make it a habit to just enjoy music instead of study music. But I think that part is important as well. And then just playing your instrument, you know. And for many educators, it's different. So some people, they have different life situations. They don't have a lot of time. So in the book, I talk about simple suggestions. So maybe one day you sit in, I'm a string guy. Maybe I sit in the viola section and I just play a couple notes with them, or I'll just sit in the cello section and just play. Um, or in between classes, I might play through a couple lines of my students' music. It doesn't have to be anything hard, just something that keeps me playing. Just play a couple lines on that, play a scale. Whatever you got to do to stay connected to your instrument, I think it's really important for your musical health, your musical well being. Because, as an educator, you are a musician too. So you don't want to lose those roots. So I think that's what I'm trying to get at in the book. And I think it can go a long way for yourself and for your students to see that.
I think that a lot of educators think that they wouldn't have the time. But I think it's one of those things, even if you just did 5 or 10 minutes, or just pull out your instrument and play along with the kids, depending on what level you teach. Like I teach a lot of beginners right now, and
Hmm.
I'm always playing along with them. Sometimes on saxophone, my main instrument, but sometimes it's trumpet or baritone, just
Hmm.
to so they can get an example of what the characteristic tone might be, and
Correct.
play professional recordings for them too. And I have a confession to make as a saxophone player. If I could say a prayer and God would magically let me be as good on cello as I am on saxophone, but I'd have to give up saxophone, I would do it. I would do it
Yeah.
in an instant.
Yeah.
When I'm having one of those days when I just need to reconnect to why I do this, I'll put on Yo-Yo Ma and listen to him play some things, and I'm just like in tears in my room.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's great, though. That's great that you have that outlet, and that's what we want for our students as well, that appreciation.
One of the sections of your book, this really hit home for me because it's something even 25 years in as an educator, 35 years in the music field, this still is hard for me. And you say the sting of rejection from students quitting can sometimes make you second guess many of your decisions and interactions. If several students happen to quit your program at the same time, you may even question your effectiveness as an educator. I still struggle with that. I still do when I have several students quit at a time. What are some of the ways maybe that you've kind of pushed through that?
Well, I think first and foremost, if it doesn't make you become introspective, then that speaks kind of to your own character, so that's a good thing that you were thinking about who am I, and that's when we talked about that earlier. Who am I? What am I doing? Am I doing right by these students? Am I being professional? Am I being caring? And like I said, my descriptors are strong, gracious, and caring. Am I fulfilling um, those obligations and those descriptors? And if I am, and I'm still having issues, I just kind of think through, okay, and I ask questions. A lot of times, just asking questions will lead to better clarity. But just ask questions. Okay, so what's going on? Well, I don't like to practice. If someone doesn't want to practice, then you can offer. I've offered in the past, hey, well, why don't you show up during break or during lunch, and I can help. I can sit with you and practice, and we can make it fun. And if they still don't want to, like I said, you're not going to win everybody. And sometimes it only takes one student to really bring down the morale. Um, but as long as you have been caring, you have been professional, you have been transparent, um, realize that you're not going to keep everybody. And there's going to be cycles of that. But you do your best to encourage them. And at the end of the day, like I said, you can't win everybody, but you can do your best to, with the students that you do have that remain, give them your absolute best every single day, every single class. Don't phone it in. Um, and a lot of times, that effort it can sometimes lead those students who left back. It can bring them back if they realize,
Uh-huh.
hey, you know what, this guy, whether he spells bad and he looks funny, tells bad jokes, whatever. But he's offering a great experience, and I can't deny that. And sometimes you'll get them back. So that's one thing to look forward to. And then if you start to realize that the reasons why kids are leaving is, sometimes it's out of your control. So if it could be an administrative thing where, hey, they're offering XYZ class where the students get to, basically play with toys, and it's hard for you to compete with that because the discipline of music it's a long drawn out process that doesn't have instant gratification.
Yep.
And that's kind of the challenge, with our field right now. It's not instant gratification when so much of our society has become that, particularly after the pandemic, and everything is online, on screen, hitting a button, and you get results. So that's definitely a difficulty. But if the students are not there for the right reasons, then I think you have to make adjustments where you can, and without compromising the integrity of the program. Be introspective, but like I said, give your best to the students that remain and use that as a tool to help get those students back and recruit new ones, because word of mouth will be the best kind of advertising for your program.
I had a unusual thing happen with the whole COVID thing. We kind of lost a year of really getting a good foundation of music students. So last year
Yeah.
when we were kind of back to mostly normal, I had two beginning groups, a sixth grade group and a seventh grade group that were beginners. And I had like an eighth grade band of students who had played. So this year, I knew coming in that basically I don't have any third year players this year. They're basically all beginners or second year players, even
Mm-hmm.
the eighth graders. But the interesting thing, in March, April last year, most of my seventh graders were saying, "I'm not going to do band next year. No offense, Mr. Vine, but I'm not doing band." And I just said, "That's okay.
Yeah.
There'll be kids who are doing band." And then by the end of May, almost all of those that said they weren't going to do band, they said, I'm coming back to band, Mr. Vine." And I said, "Oh, what was the change?" And there, it was almost like the only reason they were coming to band because they didn't like the other options. They were just like, "Well, I'm not going to do such and such class, so I guess I'll just
Mm-hmm.
do band again." And it had really worried me when so many of them were saying they weren't going to do it. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be starting all over with the seventh graders that had been sixth graders, and then whatever sixth
Mm-hmm.
graders come in. But here I have the actually, this is my fifth year at my current school, and it's actually the biggest 7/8 band that I've had in the 5 years that I've been there. And I was expecting it to be the smallest after all
Mm.
those former seventh graders saying that they were going to quit. So it was interesting to see that.
Yeah, and I think another component of that is your ability to develop community. If you develop a strong community, again, this goes to what happens outside of the content. It's going to be hard for a kid to not want to be a part of something that's been special and that's been something that they felt a part of and welcomed in. So I try and always do things like, I'll take my kids ice skating. I pick a day and invite all the families and go ice skating. I pick a day where we go bowling. I pick a day where I will do pizza nights where we'll have pizza from every chain, and we kind of do a pizza face off, and they enjoy that. And we'll do movie
That
nights.
sounds really cool. I would just enjoy
Yeah,
that
and
just because I love pizza.
me too. And again, that has nothing to do with music, but everything to do with building community and building a program that they feel a part of and invested in. And I think that would help significantly with making sure that they don't want to quit. They don't want to lose that aspect because it's so valuable. And I always tell my students, this is your home base. No matter what's going on in school, what's going on campus, you can always come here. This is your home base, your fortress of solitude, so to speak. So I think the development of the community is a big aspect to retention, um, and also recruiting. I think if word gets out that, man, they do all this cool stuff over there, and it's like a family, has a family atmosphere. Um, I think that goes a long way. Like I said, that word of mouth is your best advertisement.
My kids, I know it's part of the middle school mystique, so to speak, but they seem to complain about everything. So like we were the last couple of weeks, we were working on some Christmas tunes after Thanksgiving break. And they said, why are we working on these? We don't, because I don't do a December concert. I usually do one in the middle of November, and then we'll have another one in
Mhm.
February. And they said, why are we working on these? We don't have a concert coming up. I said, well, we're going to do some caroling. And they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to make sure I'm absent that day. And I said, well, that's okay if you're absent. You're going to have a makeup assignment for missing that, or you can just come and play. That's much easier. And so none of them were absent, but they were just making me laugh because then we did it and they got the applause. We went to like 3 classrooms
Mhm.
and played 2 or 3 songs for each. They got the applause and they seemed to really love it. And we got back to the class. It was the day before. It was just this past Friday, right before Christmas
Mhm.
break. And so then we had like 15 minutes left. So I told them, just go ahead and pack up and hang out for the rest of the time. So they really enjoyed it. But it was just they complain about everything, and it makes me laugh. I like how you spend several pages, maybe 4 or more, I think, talking about traditions and making those happen. And there's one thing that I underlined. It says, if there's a tradition that seems particularly disagreeable to you, make it a priority to phase it out over time. And it reminded me of my second position, my previous position to this one. They only had one tradition, and that was at pep band games. You the director would bring tons of candy, and they were just shoving their face full of candy between pep band songs. And
Mm.
that just like it if you've ever worked with wind instruments, it just like tears your soul out. It's like, no, you can't be putting all this sugar into your reeds and into your. And so but
Yeah,
I
it's
was
kind
like,
of
this is the
gross.
only tradition, this is the only tradition they have. So I did that for 2 years, and then by then we had 3 or 4 other traditions that we did. And so I told him, as we got to that third season, I said, okay, I'm cutting out the candy thing. And I told them why, and they seemed to understand why. And they were fine with it. But I was like, I can't take
Yeah.
their only tradition from them.
Yeah, especially when it's candy. And that's, that was something that I had to encounter when I got to my last school. They were getting candy every single day. And I was like, how is this how is this a thing? And they would get candy for, not doing anything. They didn't have to practice. They didn't have to rehearse sometimes. And I was thinking, what? So I ended up kind of altering the tradition. So where it was, okay, how about we do Jolly Rancher Friday? So after a long week, a hard fought week, we'll earn that. So there's still candy involved, but it's not, free for all. And
Uh-huh.
I think that was one way to approach a tradition that I just was not particularly fond of. Put a nice positive spin on it. Oh, look, you guys work so hard. Look, I want to reward you. And it's not every single day. It was just something fun for a Friday. So that's another, yeah, definitely another thing that you want to be kind of cautious of, not changing too fast, making sure that your changes are incremental, so it doesn't shock the system and turn people off. And it's so delicate in our positions in our field because we're with these students for so many years, unlike academic teachers. You really need longevity and you want them to stick around. So the more we can do to soften the blow of change for them, the better.
Definitely. That's some great advice there. Now, there's something that you had in your book that I'm just going to say is probably a little bit controversial, but I fully agreed with it. And so I'll read to you from the book.
Mhm.
When students would complain about certain performance assessment grades, I gave them the opportunity to retake those assessments as many times as it took for them to get it right and improve their grades. And like I was saying, I agree with that totally. And that's the same policy I have. In fact, I tell students that until the last day of the grading period, they can retake an assessment as many
Hmm.
times as they want to improve it. I don't want them to just take it and it not have worked on it. And so I make that clear to them. But there are, I would say, the majority of people in our field feel like it's a once and done thing. So maybe if you can, I know my reasons why I feel like that works better, but maybe you can share some of why you like that, why you like to do that policy.
Well, for one, it's reflective of life. What other aspect of life is it one and done? You typically have multiple chances. And I think if we don't do it like that, what we're teaching students is failure is final. And I don't believe that to be the case. I feel as though we are, as educators and as just people, we're lifelong learners. And I don't want students to feel like if I didn't get it this time, then that's it. Then I can't learn anymore. And I just have to, you know, suffer the consequences. I feel that there should be a consequence for not striving to reach your personal best, as opposed to not getting something the first time, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
And I think it doesn't behoove anybody to have a concert where a student hasn't really done well on an assessment, and me as a teacher hasn't put in the time to help them along. That's my job. That's what I'm here to do. Meet them where they are, and then help them along to reach their personal best. And personal best will look different for everybody. But I think it's important that me as an educator, that I'm working with the students, meeting them where they are and working with them to help them achieve, you know. And nobody wants to go to, I give this example to my students all the time. I say, you pay good money to go see these concerts to these pop artists that you love. How would you like to go hear a D plus concert? And you're going to pay about $100 for a ticket. And nobody raises their hand. And how about a C plus concert? No, I don't want to pay that money. How about a B? Not really, because you're paying a lot of money. So you're saying the standard is an A. You want to hear an A plus concert. Well, your family and friends and your colleagues here at school are no different. Maybe they're not paying for the concert, but they're paying with their time, and we want to be respectful of that. So we want to make sure whatever we're putting out there is representative of what we can do and reaching for our personal best. Doesn't mean that everybody has to have 100. As a matter of fact, I tell my students, let's at least say an 80%, because that's out of respect for me, out of respect for you, out of respect for your colleagues, you're in the classroom, and out of respect for your audience, that we can at least play it at a B, B minus. So that's my reasoning behind it. And I think you end up also seeing students achieve more than you're asking for, actually. So if I tell a student, hey, it's not where it needs to be, but I want you to go back and work on it. Here are the specific things that you should do. Here's how you should practice. A lot of times I'll say, hey, just, spend 10, 15 minutes on it. They'll go home, but they'll spend 20 and 30. And then they've just gotten that much better. And that wouldn't have happened, and they wouldn't have moved in that direction if I didn't give them that chance to
Uh-huh.
um, pull forward. And another thing that I tell my students is, we can only move as fast as the person who's practicing the least. So if I instill in my students that, you know, practice, but if you don't get it right, just give up. It's fine. You fail. Then you're not really creating that morale of, hey, I'm going to keep moving forward. I don't want to be that person who's practicing the least, kind of like a healthy competition, and not just with everybody else, but with themselves. Like, hey, I can
Uh-huh.
do X amount of minutes and have this amount of time of targeted practice, strategic practice, and improve. So the whole process is really important. And I guess it also reflects life, in everything that you do. You fall down and you get back up. So that's the idea.
I don't know if orchestra teachers use this type of system, but a lot of band teachers, including me, have a karate belt type of system for achievement when
Hmm.
the beginning students especially. And on mine, when everybody completes one of the levels, it has to be 100%. Everyone has to pass it successfully. I make brownies for the class, and that seems to be a big
Mm,
incentive. And it cost me about $3 to make a
yeah,
tray of
there you
brownies
go.
for a class. And what I found, I'd say about 70% of the kids, they're ahead on their assessments. Like I set some timelines and deadlines for, you have to reach this one by this date. 70% are ahead. Another 20% or
Hmm.
so, they're doing them as we hit the deadline, and usually within a week. And then there's about 10% that I have to really push. But a lot of times when they're the last one, and it's like, I'm not doing brownies till it's 100%. And
Hmm.
Johnny's the last one. Two or three kids will volunteer to tutor him, and he'll come in to get help and eventually pass it. And then he's like the hero, because we get to have brownies because he passed that
Mm.
assessment. And I've found a lot of success with that, and I don't mind making the brownies. It's well worth it for what I see in the achievement.
Yeah, bribery is not beneath me.
So, Adrian, I'm guessing people can, and I'm going to put this in the show notes also. I'm guessing people can get your book at adriangordonmusic.com. Is that the
Yeah,
best
it's
place for them to
it's
go?
they can go to adriangordonmusic.com to find out everything that I'm doing. I also compose, so if they wanted to find out about that, and also the book. And then it's also on Amazon, so if people want to check it out on Amazon, note to self, they can check it out there and leave a nice, honest review.
All right, and I will get the Amazon link from you also and put that as well, because I know for me, when I'm buying a book, I kind of prefer to do it on Amazon because I've already got everything set up there and I can just click to buy, and it makes it so much
Yeah.
easier. So I'll put both your website and the Amazon link. Any closing words to our audience? Words of wisdom or
I would say the biggest thing that I've learned in the past 18 years is, and it's really hard to do this, and I still struggle with it, but give yourself grace. Um, there's a lot to get done and there's a lot to worry about, but you can't solve it all. So you got to take time with yourself, give yourself grace, and realize you can only do what you can do. You're not superhuman, but give yourself grace and do your best, and everything else will fall into place.
That is awesome closing advice. And Adrian, thank you so much for being on the Music Ed podcast. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
The Music Ed Podcast, where you get quick and easy tips for how to be a better band teacher.